Today we are interviewing Wes Greavu of Crawfordsville, Indiana. Wes, where were you born?
In St. Paul, Minnesota.
St. Paul, Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
And Wes, do you remember where you were June 25th, 1950?
June 25th, 1950. I was in the service. I think, wait a minute, 25th, 1950 doesn't ring a bell.
That was the day the North Koreans
crossed
the 38th parallel. It was a Sunday.
I don't remember where I was. I traveled a lot, and I should know it. I've been out on the road, and if my recollection is bad, or my mind, I was probably in California.
In California. Were you in service at the time?
No. I was in the service, I think it was in early 52.
Evidently then you were a volunteer to the Air Force.
Yes, the second time around. I was in the Army Air Force for about 15 months from April of 44 till later the end of 45, after it was over.
Where were you stationed then during World War II?
I took my training in Wichita Falls, Texas. Shepherd Field was the first training. Talking about action, the sand blew in one day from Oklahoma and blew out the next day, so that was the biggest action we had. But, and then from there, I did some radio. They sent me to radio school for a few months, but it wasn't flight radio, it was just plain radio. And then after the war, after that, they asked if anybody wanted to leave, so I left.
Then you were entitled to the GI Bill.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Which I had used to buy a house after I got married.
After you got married, did you go to college after you got out?
No, I kept working. We had a family of 8 children, so I tried to help the family out. And we had 8. I had 5 sisters and 2 other brothers. And I'm actually, I'll be 74 this month, and in September, I think we're going to celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations, sir. We just celebrated our 50th. I got married after I got out of service from Korea.
33, 32. When did you get married? 52.
53. We got married in 53. Yeah. I got home September and I saw her for the first time in a couple of years, and I decided that was it. Well, Wes, you went back in the Air Force early 1952. Where did you have to take basic again?
No. Went right to survival training.
Tell us about survival training.
Back then, they set up, I was in a B-29 group plane. There was 10 of us in a group. And they sent 10 planes with 10 servicemen, pilots, co-pilots, gunners, and we went to Reno, Nevada, in the mountains in Reno. And the temperature was like 3 below, and we pitched tents, and they were parachutes. We used 2 parachutes to pitch a tent. 5 of us were in each tent. I wound up being a cook at the moment because I was the only one that could try to take potatoes peeled. We were given 4 potatoes and 4 days rations to last 10 days.
Wow.
So one day I just peeled the potatoes and boiled the potatoes in a lot of water, and that was a meal. The next day, I would use the other part of the potatoes, and we always had potato soup, and that was one of our meals. And we did a lot of training there. One of the things that they taught us, that was one of the, if we were caught, it used to be you gave your rank, name, serial number, but then it started that we could also tell them where we took off from.
That's interesting.
Anytime when we were taking off then, we would never go back to the base we were at. Whatever airport or whatever place we took off, you could tell them. So it made it easier, so they just figured that was the way. And they would attempt to try to rescue pilots. They'd make 2 attempts to rescue pilots, nobody else. Pilots were the only ones they would try to rescue twice. And they did have one show that was kind of cute. They had a C-47 Goonie bird, one of the old Model Ts.
Yeah.
And it normally took that plane probably 1.5 miles to take off. Well, what they did, they put a couple of JATO bombs on it, and they took off in a little over 2 blocks. And it just shot up in the air like a rocket. But, and then after the 12, let's see, I don't know if I mentioned that, we ran out of rations and one of the guys caught a porcupine. They skinned it. I boiled it for 8 hours. I fried it for 6 hours, and it still tasted like pine. It was tough, but you had to eat something. I lost 10 pounds in 9 days.
Wow.
If you want me to go further, after survival, they told us that basically now we are in a concentration camp and we're going to escape. And they told us where the headquarters, where we were supposed to go. They gave us a rough plan of, we had to go through barbed wire that had tin cans. They had small mines that if they stepped on, they didn't explode. They just gave out a noise, a whistle. And they had a few dogs out there. And the men were dressed as Russians. And I picked a partner that I thought wouldn't act foolish. Because there's guys that everybody wants to be a hero, but they don't think. So we waited till most of them went, and then when we heard a few of them hit the barbed wire, then we jumped through when we heard the noise, and we really circled. And 9 of us out of 100 made it through. And we watched from a distance, and these Russian-American soldiers, they were tough. This wasn't a game. They weren't playing a game. They had everybody stripped down, run in snow, through water, and they banged them. They were hitting them with the butts of the rifles. Not to kill them, but they banged them. I mean, they got bruised, and they were pushing around. And we walked in. They congratulated us, but they said, you got to go through some of the treatment. So we had to strip down, and they threw us in snow banks, made us run through water. And I cut my feet a little bit, but I wasn't going to cry too much or holler, because the more you hollered, the worse it got. And one of the fellows there, his dad was a congressman. And he called his dad right away, and we got back to Offutt. We were told survival training would not be anymore.
Wes, you were on B-29s, is that right?
I was on B-29s out of SAC. We had 5 or 6 different aircrafts. LeMay had 2 Stratocruisers. One Stratocruiser had all his radio equipment that he could run a war or anything on it. He had a backup. And at SAC headquarters, you got the underground communications. And as a radio man, SAC headquarters to us was called Radar. Radar was our home base. We had B-25s, B-29s, C-47s. We had converted B-50 bombers. We had some other small aircraft. Every Tuesday we used to have a milk run. Somebody, a colonel or general, had to fly every Tuesday morning to Washington, the Pentagon. You'd fly in, he would go to the Pentagon, then you'd take him home that night. And I had a big trip there that I had, we flew all around the country with different generals, and that one sheet there, we went from SAC headquarters in Omaha, we went to London, to France, to Spain, to Rabat-Salé. Now that was a cutie. We land in French Morocco, Rabat-Salé. And I get off, and the pilot said, go check with, get us some fuel. And Bluebird, who was our general, all the generals and colonels, they were called birds. And that was it. When we flew, we had a bird. And when we went back, we had a different bird, but it was the same man. So I went to ask for fuel, and they said, sorry, you can't get any fuel. You're not taking off for 2 days. And I said, what do you mean? Well, it's okay to land here, but this is the praying season. No planes take off. So I wasn't too happy when I had to go tell the rest of the crew and the general we can't take off. So then I have to get on the radio, and I had a radio called the ARC 13, and that could give me 10,000 volts. I could talk to Japan, I could talk clear around the world. It was powerful. So I called Omaha, gave him the bad news, and there's a major there that wanted the plane because he had to get it ready to send it out. He said he wants the plane back, and I tried to tell him, I can't get your plane back because we can't take off. So he got huffy, and not at the moment. He turned around and says, I want to talk to General Sweeney. And I said, who? I said, we don't have a General Sweeney. We just got a crew of B-29s. The general was sitting across from me. And I want to talk to him. I said, sorry, sir, we don't have him. And will you tell him he's got to come back? I says, I can't tell him because I don't know where he is. He's not here with us. And the general was just looking, and he's getting mad. But so eventually we left, and we got back to Omaha. Actually, it was snowing, and the lieutenant that we had was the greatest pilot that we could, and it was really blowing up a storm. And you know, we've been gone for about 10, 12 days, and everybody wanted to get home to see his girlfriend. And he looked at it, and he says, I don't know if we're going to land in this. Major said he wanted the plane. And I said, the lieutenant's going to make a pass, and if he wants, if not, we're going to go to probably Peoria, St. Louis. And he said, I want to talk to the general. I says, we don't have a general on board. So we made a pass, and we landed, and he came up right away in the Jeep. And he said he wanted to talk to the radio operator, so I stepped out and said, I'm the radio operator. So he started reading me the riot act, and the general walked up behind me and looked at him and said, you may be a major right now, but tomorrow morning you could be a buck private. You don't ever, it's secret, top secret, ask for anybody. I was Bluebird, and you knew that. And read him the riot act, so that was the end of that.
Wes, I have a question to ask you. You mentioned the C-47.
Right.
Could that thing fly on one engine?
Yes, it could. It was like a Model T4 back then. You could use wire or anything to get that to fly. It could fly on one engine. And it only had two. It was hard taking off. Landing wasn't bad, but taking off, you couldn't see much but the side because the plane was at an angle. And but I got one real scary story. When we used to go to Washington, this B-50 plane, the engine went out after we landed, So this good lieutenant wound up, they took the engine off and he put in the Goonie bird. And he said, Wes, let's go back to Omaha. So I get in the plane with this big engine sitting in it, and there isn't too much room. And we always flew with, what I'm trying to think of, parachute. And with him, I never would have jumped the plane because this guy wouldn't leave it. He could land it. So we're going down the runway, and all of a sudden he comes a screeching halt. And oh man, that's what's the matter. That barbed wire looked pretty tall, and the Potomac is right there. I got to go back again. We go back, and he gunned it, and he just sat there and rattled that plane. And we took off, and I bet we didn't clear that fence more than a foot.
Tell me, when did you get out?
You know, I guess as old age forgetting, I think I stayed in for a little over 2 years.
2 years.
And out of Offutt, our barracks, oh man, we had 2 men to a barracks, and it was the finest small apartment you could think of. It was, we had our beds, and you know, they really treated us pretty good. At the time, you know, you want to get married and go out, but what we had was kind of foolish. I mean, the life of Riley, flying around at times, if you're sitting there every day, once a week we had to go up and get a rub down up at headquarters. But it felt so good, or play badminton, we'd go 5 or 6 times a week.
Wes, is your wife from this area, or?
She was born in Burlington, Iowa.
So you met her when you were in the
Omaha.
Omaha.
Her mother and stepfather lived in Omaha, and that's where we met.
So you were married while you were in service.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel you had a difficult?
I got married right after. I'm sorry.
Oh, right
I
after.
left right after. I had $50 when we got married. I had a lot of money.
Wes, did you feel you had a hard time readjusting to civilian life?
No, the things that we went through, you know, this survival, it really gave a perspective that what could really happen. And the Americans that were playing Russians gave a pretty good idea how tough it could be. But you come back, you feel that, hey, you got a lot of friends here. And the people in the service, you might fight them somewhere, but when it got down to the nitty-gritty, they were with you. And it wasn't hard to jump into civilian life, thinking that, hey, a lot of the guys came out of the service, and they're either a couple years younger than me or a few years older, and pretty decent sort, so.
Then you never got to spend actual time in Korea?
No, never got.
Would you like to add anything else, sir?
No, I don't know if that's...
Thank you very much for coming in.
Wes, let me ask you.
Sure.
So you were in World War II and then got out, and then they called you back. I mean, was that, it was...
Well, they asked if I'd come back.
Yeah.
And they asked if I'd sign up again because they were looking for radio operators. But I said I wouldn't unless I could come back as a flight radio operator. And they said, come on back.
But it was kind of your choice, is that?
Yes, it was my choice.
That was your choice.
My choice.
Some of the fellows apparently, they didn't have a choice.
Right. I had a
Some
choice.
areas.
I had a choice.
And so then how long were you in the second stint?
A little over 2 years.
Did you ever think about making it a career?
For a while there I did. I enjoyed it, but the 10-day, 12-day flights, I guess kind of lonesome.
Well, the prospect of getting married.
I know, and there's, you know, guys have been over there months and months, but when you're there every day and then you're gone for a week or so, it wasn't that hard, but...
did you stay in a reserve capacity after you got out?
No,
So you went cold turkey?
cold turkey, yeah.
Knowing the history of the period, Wes, that was an excellent decision.
Yeah, that,
That you went out cold turkey.
yeah.
Thank you very much.